So there's plenty for us to discuss. Oil prices, King's visit, why so few civil servants get fired. We might try and get onto that as well. But shall we start with, it's really the news moving the markets this morning, the rise in oil and gas prices, what it might mean for us. Andrew, I want to ask if you're a fool or not. Not because I'm being rude and mean-spirited, but Donald Trump says you're a fool if you think that a rise in oil prices is a price not worth paying for what he regards as a short-term bid for peace in the Middle East.
Well, I guess you would have to file me under F for fool, because I think the situation is very serious. He's right in that a short-term blip in oil and gas prices won't do any long-term damage. The problem is that we don't know if it's going to be short-term or not. I mean, this does seem at the moment war without end. We're now into week 2. And yet there is, and although Iran has taken a pounding, the regime is still there. It's just picked a new leader. There is no sign of an uprising in the streets or rebellion. And it looks like we're just in for more of the same. Now, for how long? Because the longer this goes on, the longer oil and gas prices are at elevated levels, the greater the danger to the Western economies, and indeed the economies of Asia as well. And the danger will be seen in higher prices, which will translate into higher interest rates, which then runs the risk, as it happened in 73 and 79, of recession. In 73, quite a deep recession followed after that, and almost every sitting government lost power there. So the stakes are very high. If Donald Trump is right and he can get this done quickly, then no long-term damage will be done. But we see no sign of that yet. We don't know how it's going to end quickly. And therefore, the risks of economic disruption to the global economy grow greater every day. And Britain is more vulnerable than most.
Well, we'll get into that in a second. But there's also this question of what does Trump even regard as done here? I mean, he's not a regime changer, for better or worse, Donald Trump. He didn't change the regime, as you said, as we've talked about, in Venezuela. He's a regime modifier. But The danger here in Iran is he might end up being a regime strengthener. Because although the country will be on its knees, if this new Khamenei has the authority, he has the IRGC, there's nothing to suggest that therefore Iran will change its tune anytime soon.
No, there is nothing to suggest that. And indeed, the new Ayatollah is closer to the IRGC, which is basically the military wing that props the regime up. He's closer than his father was to the IRGC. He's in some ways their creation. So it's not clear. Now, you're right. Trump is not a regime changer in the way that George Bush and Dick Cheney thought, or even Tony Blair thought they could be regime changers. He's a regime restructurer. He's done that in Venezuela. He wants to do that in Cuba, where he may get a chance quite soon. And that looks like what he would settle for in Tehran, for a regime that was still autocratic, not a democracy, but didn't threaten Israel and didn't want to pursue a nuclear weapons program. But that's a long way off. There's no sign of that yet at all. It looks like this regime can take a lot of pain. It looks like it has security, its own security, in depth in the country. It will not be easily shaken. And if that is the case, and the Strait of Hormuz remains closed, and by the way, this is the first time it's ever been closed. It wasn't closed in previous Gulf wars. It wasn't even closed in the Iran-Iraq war. And this has been a huge policy upset for the Americans. Because I'm told by sources in the Gulf that the Americans assured the Gulf states that the Strait would not be closed, that Iran wouldn't dare to do that Iran needed to get its oil out. Well, Iran is still getting its oil out. There are still ships going through the Strait. They're Iranian ships with Iranian oil, but there are no others. There are now 1,000 ships holed up in the Gulf, full of oil and gas, and not able to move. And where is the American plan? They started this war. Where is the American plan to get that strait open? After all, we have a massive armada, the Americans there. Why are they not using that to get the strait open? Now, in the old days, the British would have been there to help. There would have been naval convoys, including the Royal Navy, to keep the strait open. Well, we don't have a single ship in the Gulf now, so we're entirely irrelevant to that exercise. But why are the Americans, along with the navies of the Gulf, the Gulf states have their own navies now, why are they not reopening the Strait? It's a huge flaw at the center of the American strategy in this war.
And it's no consolation to anyone in this country that it's Donald Trump's war, not our war, because the effect on our economy will be the same, whoever started, whoever continues it. Why are we so vulnerable, do you think, when it comes to oil and gas prices particularly in the United Kingdom?
Well, we're vulnerable, not so much. We're all subject to global oil and gas. And of course, we depend quite a lot on gas for electricity generation. So that has an impact. And gas is the kind of benchmark price to set electricity prices. But we're not alone in that. Our problem is that if two things are an issue here. One, if we're thrown into a recession, and we're not that far away from that. And secondly, if the government has to spend tens of billions of pounds shoring up our gas bills again, our fiscal position is very weak and basically not strong enough to survive either of these two things. And I think there's a great danger that the bond markets at the moment are on the lookout for those fiscal positions which are vulnerable to this and are therefore pushing up the price of debt. And I think that's the bigger economic issue for Britain, that we do not have a robust enough fiscal position to withstand either a recession or the need for another massive subsidy in energy prices by the state.
And Andrew, it's partly why we were interested by Steve Reed's line. We had him on the programme earlier on this morning and we were asking him about the oil and gas prices and what the government might seek to do. And he said everything is always under review. We'll review the situation for consumers. But he was also saying, there's no immediate panic. We were asking about gas storage. He said it's not a big deal. We've got what we've always had in terms of the amount of time we've got stored up of gas supply. But it seems a little bit like that this government, it knows there's a problem. It does know that capacity is not really where we would hope it to be. It does know that prices are about to rise. And in the same way it understood that America was building up assets in the region and didn't do very much, everything seems to come a step too late.
Well, China has 200 days of oil and gas supplies. That's how much they have in their inventories. So they can survive for quite a long while. We have 2 days of gas supplies. Now, we do get gas in by pipeline. We can get more that way. We import electricity, particularly from France, because of its nuclear power. It's much more reliable than our electricity. So there are other ways. I think it's true there isn't an immediate problem, but there will be a problem if gas supplies begin to tailor off. And remember, we're now bringing in, because of Ukraine, Europe is now bringing in a lot more gas from the Gulf. We're bringing more gas in from Qatar in LNG, and as a result of that, we're more dependent on that region than we were before. Now, Norway is by far our biggest gas supplier, and Norwegian gas supplies are pretty reliable, and we can count on them. But all oil price is at the margin. And basically, there is no LNG getting out of the Gulf at the moment. Indeed, they are stopping gas production because they've got nowhere to store it. And that is a problem that is looming and will become more of a problem in the weeks ahead. And I'm not sure that the government has thought this through. I'm not sure it is taking enough anticipatory action to make sure there are alternative sources of energy coming in if the gas supplies are now going to be in jeopardy for the foreseeable future. And I would say there's a 50-50% chance that they are going to be in jeopardy for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, it's worth us pointing out this morning the government has said they dispute the idea that there are only 2 days of gas storage supply in this country, partly because of, Andrew, what you said about the pipelines in, but it's no doubt it's far, far less than what is available in other countries in Europe and around the world. Is the answer then to say that the King shouldn't go to Washington next month? That the Liberal Democrats say the visit should be cancelled? Is that the answer?
Well, it has got, I'm kind of sympathetic to it, but then when I heard the Liberal Democrats are in favour of it, then I thought, well, it must be wrong. Look, it's tempting. The timing is hardly propitious. But I think, given that this visit's already in advanced state of planning, I think if we were to cancel now, it would be almost a declaration of diplomatic war against the United States with unfathomable consequences. And Trump wouldn't take this sitting down. He would regard this as a personal insult. And who knows what the backlash might be. So I'm afraid through gritted teeth and with a certain amount of trepidation, I would continue with the visit. It's only for 3 days. There'll only be one dinner in the White House. And who knows, the king may now have to earn his money and do a great job for Britain in smoothing over what are undoubtedly difficult times for Anglo-American relations. So rather than cutting it off, the knee-jerk reaction of Ed Davey before he falls in the water again for some unknown purpose, perhaps we should use the power, the soft power of the monarchy, particularly in Donald Trump's eyes, and use it to keep the show on the road and to show that even where there are disagreements, and there are right to be disagreements at the moment between Washington and London, even there, Anglo-American relations, even at a time of disagreement, can continue to function well and we can remain friends, and the King's visit will be the symbol of that.
Well, it's a hopeful point.
It's also, I think, very reasonable. 'Cause the sort of talk show answer is, don't let him go.
Yeah.
Get it right up, you Trump, you terrible man who disrespects our servicemen and is bringing war around the world and has no conscience. But really, once you've had that moment of Yahoo sucks, where does it leave you? I think Andrew must be right on that point, mustn't he?
Yeah, I think most people who are messaging in this morning do seem to agree. Andrew, stay where you are, because we've also got lots of people getting in touch about jury service. Lots and lots of you have done jury service and you want to talk about it, albeit anonymously. So we're going to talk about jury trials in this country and also civil servants.
Jury trials, it feels like we've been talking this over and over again because it was one of those policies that was leaked. And then Leveson recommended it. Then there was a reaction to that, which was leaked, and so on and so on. But it is about to happen. Can I just read you a couple of... Because in some ways, the orthodox view is jury trials are a proud part of our heritage. Why would you get rid of them? They're a way of achieving justice. I just want to read a couple of messages, because there is a counter view to that, which is that for people who've been on juries... Ruth said, I did jury service back in 2008. The cases were fairly clear-cut. However, one of the deliberations started after lunch and one member of the jury said, quick, let's just decide they're guilty so I can get on that earlier bus, with others agreeing. So don't get into trouble, Ruth says. Someone else here says, I was a jury on an unpleasant sexual assault case about a decade ago. 3 occurrences shocked me. The first was the juror who could not understand the concept of reasonable doubt at all. The second was a juror who simply refused to engage in the prospects of guilt because they didn't believe that someone could do something so horrendous. And the third was after a 10-2 decision that the jury gave on one of the counts. After we returned to the jury room, one juror was shocked that the vote that we had took had been for real and said that if he'd known it mattered, he wouldn't have voted for guilty. And the argument being here, Andrew, that actually you don't always get expertise or thoughtfulness or concentration in a jury, so are we idolising the wrong thing?
You don't always get that. And obviously, jury, it's a flawed system. Every system of justice is flawed. And these are decent cases where the system clearly didn't work well, though the expertise is meant to be provided by the judge. And the judge is meant to guide the jury. The jury are lay people. That's the whole point of it. And I would say this, I'm not 100% wedded to a jury system, but I would say this. The jury system has been part of this country for time immemorial. It is always part of our constitution. It's what makes us different from other European countries. It has been copied by many other countries, most notably the United States of America, whose legal system is based on English common law. Now, if there's a case for getting rid of it, it is so part of what we are. Let's have a national debate. I'm not aware this was in the Labour Party manifesto. I'm not aware that they campaigned on this. I'm not aware that they said, vote for us and we'll get rid of juries. Indeed, I'm not aware that they said it after they got elected. It was only when they decided that, one way to get rid of the backlog on the court system is let's get rid of jury trials for most trials, not for all, but for a lot of trials. Well, that's not a good enough reason for doing it. There may be good reasons for doing it, but we should debate them. We should have it in the open. Political parties should stand for or against it. We should take it cautiously. We should weigh up both sides and then make a change. And if we make a change, what are the alternatives? The alternatives is essentially to move to European-style judgment by magistrates, in which it is one person that takes the decision for certain trials, not for the most serious, is proposed in Britain, but for certain. Well, in France and in Italy, which have an advanced system of trial by magistrate, over the years, these magistrates have become highly politicized.
Really?
In France and Germany. They are not always regarded as the impartial arbiters of justice. So other systems have their drawbacks as well. As I say, just because we've always had it isn't a reason for always keeping it, but it's not a reason for suddenly doing this, because one Justice Secretary, David Lammy, not the most accomplished Justice Secretary we've ever had, has decided it's time for a change on something which he said he would almost go to the stake to defend only a few years ago. So I think it's time to draw breath and have another look.
Yeah, and the argument's been made, the practical argument is that no one really believes this will actually reduce the backlog by very much.
Correct.
Anytime anyone's ever looked at it, I mean, it doesn't seem
what's
to
the rush?
So what's the? I think it is a very fair point. I think there is also an argument, similar about the juries, where juries can ignore the law. One of the great things a jury can do is, if they feel someone is being unfairly treated by the state, even if the law is against them, a jury can actually say, I don't care what the law is, I'm finding you, even though you are guilty, I'm finding you not guilty because I believe that's the just thing to do. And no one can stop them doing that. And there have been examples in British judicial history where that's happened. And a judge or a magistrate can't really do that, because they have to follow the law exactly. Now, you might think that's a good or bad thing, but I throw that out.
I'm not sure I think that's a good thing.
There was one case, I can't remember which case it was, but it was when someone had leaked to government, Andrew might know this case, someone had leaked a very delicate government information, and it was prosecuted in court, and the jury, even though the leak clearly happened, they'd clearly broken the Official Secrets Act, the jury were effectively saying, we believe this is in the public interest, so they said not guilty.
Yeah.
And there's an ability to do that in a way that a judge can't do.
I mean, it works in that case, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Shall we end? Well, actually, before we do, Andrew, have you seen this fire in Glasgow, which has closed down the train station?
I've only seen a little bit of it. My understanding is it's around Glasgow Central Station, which of course is right in the centre of the city, and the train services is disrupted. I've not followed it enough to know just how serious the fire has been, but as we all know, Glasgow is particularly prone to fires, and particularly prone to fires that do incredible damage to historic landmarks.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, because it looks like it's a beautiful old building that the fire's happened in. So, yeah, I mean, it's one we've got an eye on too.
Brian said, though...
Well, that's what I was going to ask
sorry.
you, but I don't know whether you know about this, Andrew, but Brian says, could you ask Andrew whether he's sad about the loss of the Blue Lagoon chippy, which apparently has been devastated by the fire which happened in Glasgow. Is that a favourite haunt of yours?
No, I'm afraid I've never heard of it.
Oh, well, there you go.
But one of the last major fires in Glasgow, of course, destroyed the Glasgow School of Art.
I remember that.
Yeah, it was awful.
Which is a European gem, not just a Scottish, not just a British, but a European, a global gem. And it got destroyed by fire. They started to rebuild it, and they got destroyed again.
How is that? I mean, that really does seem...
I mean, how is that possible?
Well,
it's unbelievable. The incompetence and stupidity of the people who run the place knows no bounds. I got into trouble recently. I'm not often in Glasgow these days, but I was there last November for a university event. It's our university's 575th anniversary.
Wow.
The University of Glasgow is a very ancient institution. And I looked at the famous Sucky Hall Street, which is the Oxford Street of Glasgow, and used to be one of the most famous thoroughfares in Europe. It's a total shambles, and well, I can't use the
yes, I thank you for
yes.
Don't use any Glaswegian in this. Actually, I think.
No, I don't think that would be appropriate. But it's a mess, and of course the city council got up in arms because I criticised it. But Glaswegians poured in on my side. They know it's a mess. They're living with it every day, and it's a terrible thing to see. And I just hope this fire hasn't done damage. There are a lot of buildings around Glasgow Central Station which are of huge historic importance, and many of them, I have to say, in almost slum-like conditions. And I hope that they have not been taken out by this fire.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, Andrew. Before we let you go, can I get your take on this story, which this headline really, it surprised us this morning. The headline is, the Conservatives say that civil servants are 12 times more likely to die in post than be sacked. They've been looking at Whitehall employment policies and they found that some dismissal procedures for civil servants involve 17 steps, each of which allowed for an appeal. Surely that cannot be right.
Well, I can't speak for the veracity of the exact figures of the ratio, but I do know in general it's pretty hard to be fired from the civil service. I don't quite understand why they stay in post much longer, though, until old age, because my understanding is it's also pretty easy to retire early from the civil service on quite a full pension. So I don't quite understand that. But is it hard to be fired from the civil service? Yes, it is. You really do have to have done something pretty terrible. Can you stay in post for a long time even though you're useless? Yes, you can. And by the way, at the same time, you can take many more sick days per year than you'd ever be allowed in the private sector. So, and you retire on a pretty decent pension. So by and by, we'll soon be getting like the French, where for most mothers to see their son and daughter, what kind of career would they like? They want them to join the civil service because it has the best job security, the best pension and pretty decent pay and social status.
Well, there's something in that, Andrew. It has to be said. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Always great to have you with us.
Oh, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, we've really installed that, and that lightens my heart. The Andrew Neil bye-bye is now an institution on Times Radio. Bye-bye, Andrew.
Bye-bye.